My name is Stanley Kasprzyk. I was born in the village of Kościelec, near the city of Inowrocław in Poland, on May 5th, 1936. My mother was Zofia Szałkowska. My dad was Walenty Kasprzyk. I had three brothers. The oldest one was Ted, Tadeusz, Andrzej, Andy, and Jerzy, George. So this is a photo of the family. I'm the little guy in the, that's me, 3 years old. So, and Ted, so this was in June of 1939, where Ted went to his first communion. Then this is George, this is Andy, and Mom and Dad. Okay, Mom took care of the house, the whole family, while Dad, together with the parish priest and the organist, the three of them basically took care of the whole village. In 1939, a big war broke out. That war was World War II. And the reason it was called the World War is because most of the countries in the world were actually involved. My dad was drafted into the army, and Uncle John was captured by the Germans and put into a labor camp to help the Germans in the labor camp. And my mom took Ted to Kruszwica, Andy to Chociaż, and George and I and my mom were rounded up by the Germans, and when the Germans came in, they gave us a half hour to pack up and basically get out of the house. When the Germans came in, they put us on the cattle car, which was bound for Russia. And when the car got to the Polish-Russian border, everybody was told to exit and go on another plane that was on the Russian side. My mom, however, told us, "Hey, George and Stanley, you guys lay down on this cattle car." She covered us up with the straw. She did the same thing with the suitcases and covered herself with the straw also. So when the inspectors came, opened up the wagons and looked inside, they couldn't see anybody, and the train went all the way back to Poland, to the city of Poznań. Well, in Poznań we had many relatives, basically from my dad's side. So after 2 years of kind of going like this, from relative to relative to relative, nobody else could cope with us. Because at that time, you had to have food stamps to actually buy food and to stay in existence. Well, we didn't have any food stamps, we were not registered, so my aunt couldn't cope with it anymore. So after 2 years, my mom took George and I to the German Gestapo, and we finally got registered. So he treated us like completely human beings. We heard all kinds of weird stories that they would push out people out the second-story window. They fell on the cement sidewalk, and of course they didn't stand up. Well, with us it was different. And then he asked, "Where would you like to go?" Since her brother was by Chociaż, his name was Stanley Szałkowski, so she said, "Hey, we'd like to go by Chociaż." So he says, "Okay, you go to a village next 2 miles away from Chociaż. The village name is Rataje." And that I remember now. So in Rataje, we were already registered. And we got a large room where we all lived. Ted came back, Andy came back, and Mom would milk the cows for the farmer. Ted was a full-fledged farmhand for the same farmer. Andy would work in a cigar factory where he would take the tobacco leaf and roll it around in a special way to make the cigars. And George would take care of the cows and took them out to the pasture for the full day, making sure that they stayed only in the pasture and didn't get into any potato fields or any wheat fields. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was allowed to play. So my daily chore was to peel the potatoes, put them in a pot, boil them every day, so that the potatoes boiled would be ready for the whole family to eat on a daily basis. And we also had to go to the German officer once a week and register. And that became my weekly chore. I remember doing that, because I remember when the war ended, I came back with this registration paper, jumped out the window, ripped it in half and say, hey, we don't have to do it anymore. That I distinctly. And in 1945, the war ended. The Germans and the Japanese surrendered. The Allied forces liberated Europe. My dad was part of the Allied forces. He fought the Germans in Italy. And then Poland was liberated from the Germans. However, we were occupied by the Russians. And a year later, things did not get any better. So my dad did not come home, and a year after the war ended, we actually lived back at the same house as we did before the war. We got word from my dad that he would not come back, and that we should somehow escape from Poland and join him in England. So when we were told by Dad that he would not be coming home, George and I got to the Polish-German border, right close to where the freight train was going to go across from Poland to Germany. So we saw the Russian inspectors checking every wagon, and when they got finished inspecting, and just before the train was ready to leave and go to Germany, our uncle from Poznań, with some of his friends, basically opened up the door to one of the wagons. My mom, George, and I, and the 2 suitcases basically were scooted into the wagon, and we drove on the train for about all night till actually it stopped finally in Berlin. So in Berlin, we basically wanted to go to the house that we were supposed to meet, and we could see on the way Berlin was a big, big city. However, all you could see is a pile of bricks. Most of the houses were all in ruins. And finally we got to the address where we stayed, and we stayed with this lady for about 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, we gave whatever money to the lady that was keeping us. And she came back one day and she says, hey, that night they bribed the sentries on the bridge, and we would all cross from the Russian side to the American side in Berlin over a bridge. And there we were at midnight, close to 300 other Germans. We all started marching, and we could see the bridge out in the distance. Everybody was almost cheering, another few minutes, we would all be free. And I remember distinctly, all of a sudden, machine gun fire, Russians were all around us. Somebody tried to escape. They were killed, of course, by the Russians. And we were marched to some humongous big building. The walls must have been, the courtyard had walls, and they must have been about 20 feet tall. So all 300 of us were herded into that place. A Russian officer came around to all these people, and at random he would take one guy or whatever and escort him to a house in the middle of this courtyard, and they must have interrogated them, and then he would come back while that person stayed behind. He did that for about 20 or 30 people, and then as he walked around, he came to us. And before he came to us, my mother basically gave us instructions to George and me. Hey, don't speak any German. If he comes to us, answer him in Polish that we have a sick grandma on the other side and we have to go visit her. Sure enough, he came to us and asked us, where are we going? And in broken Polish. And my mom answered him in Polish and says, I have a sick mother on the other side and that's where we're going. So he had a flashlight that he was using as he was interrogating people. So he says, okay, follow me. And instead of going to the house in the courtyard, he basically went to the gate and opened the gate. And he says, go, you're free to go. And he says, hey, it's pitch black outside, here's this flashlight. So this is a copy of the flashlight he gave us. And basically, as you squeeze the flashlight actually would shine, and that's what he gave us. So this is a replica that you can now go to certain stores and you can actually buy it. Doesn't use any batteries, makes a lot of noise, and that's what we got. Lo and behold, some other Germans came out of the woodwork, you might say. They didn't get captured. It was only a small group, 15, maybe 20 at the most. And they says, hey, don't go across the bridge anymore because they changed the guards on the bridge, and these are different guards, and they won't let you through. So another guy says, hey, I know a way around that we don't have to go over the bridge. And so we basically followed him, and this was winter, and in most places the little river was frozen, so we walked across and got across to the other side. And then I remember, hey, everybody is so happy, the 15 or 20 of us, and my mom stepped into a hole. She fell over. I don't think she broke her foot, but definitely cracked or sprained it. So she couldn't, it was hurting her. So now George was basically holding Mom, and I was holding the 2 suitcases, and off we go the 2 miles to the train station, which was already on that side, the British side of Berlin. So I remember that. I got money, went to the train station and bought tickets to a town called Hanover in Germany. And when the train came, which was late that evening, we boarded the train and basically stayed on the train till it came to Hanover. And after Ted and Andy notified my dad in England that Mom would be coming a little bit later, he didn't know when we were coming. Well, this was like 3 weeks later. And George still carried the Mom because she was hobbling, and I carried the suitcases, and we must have been the last people off the train. Okay? And as we are walking through the train station, through the main gate, lo and behold, there was this officer dressed in military, and that was my dad. So that was his last day. After that, he says he was going back to England if we hadn't shown up. So we showed up, he met us, stayed another couple of days, and then sent us to Italy. So that I remember still too.